Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Vaadin webinar. Today we are going to talk about Vaadin UIs with XML. I am Pekka Perälä. I work in sales team with Vaadin. I have been with the company a couple of years, and today with me here is Teemu Pöntelin, our Vaadin expert, who is also the author of Vaadin add-on Clara. So Teemu, what are we going to talk about today? What is on the agenda?
Yeah, so today we start by discussing what do we mean by creating UIs declaratively using XML and what are the benefits of doing that. So that's the first thing. Then we go through some basics of the Clara add-on you already mentioned. And I will do some scary live coding. Let's see how it goes. And in the end, we have time for some questions. So,
all right, sounds good.
Yeah, so let's get started. So what do we mean by declarative programming? If we look at the definition, it basically means that the programmer can define the end result without defining the exact steps that have to be done in order to achieve that result. So in this case, we use XML to define what the layout of our program will look like, and we let the add-on take care of the rest. And why would you want to do this? I think one of the most important reasons is to create a clear separation between the presentation and the program logic. So especially when you have a separate language, in this case XML, for the presentation, you really cannot mix any logic within that XML. So then you have a clearly separated Java logic and XML for the presentation. And let's take a look at these lines of fairly typical Java code to create a user interface with Vaadin. So there you have these lines of code, and even if you are an experienced Vaadin developer, I'd argue that you cannot clearly see what kind of a user interface this represents just by quickly looking at this kind of code.
Yeah, especially if you have multiple layouts and layouts inside layouts, it could be difficult.
Yeah, and this example case here is really very simple, but still you have all these lines. So if we compare it to, for example, an XML that looks like this, I would say that you can much more easily see what kind of a layout this represents. And also, if you are doing some editing to this layout, it should be a lot easier, especially for people who don't have any Java background. For example, designers.
Yeah, they are quite often familiar with, for example, HTML.
Exactly, and this should be more familiar ground to make changes to the layout. For example, reorder these components or do some other kinds of editing. So, to recap, what are the benefits? I'd say the most important ones are this separation of concerns and the clarity of expressing your user interface and the ease of editing, especially if you're not a developer. I tried to come up with some negative sides, and especially if your user interface is very dynamic, then it might be a bit tricky to express this in XML. For example, if you generate a lot of content depending on certain conditions, you might end up with XML that has some hidden sections, and then you change these to visible. But if you have a very dynamic UI, it might get a bit tricky.
So basically, you would need to do it in a Java code anyways, like the logic part.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, is this kind of XML-based layouts used anywhere? Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of platforms that already have this kind of declarative user interface languages. for example, Android. And GWT has this UI binder, which has influenced the Clara add-on also. And the good old Adobe Flex uses XML, just like JSF and Java FX also. So this is a fairly popular way of building your layouts. But how about Vaadin? Unfortunately, there is no official way of building declarative UIs with Vaadin. But as we have a fairly active community and a directory where you can download additional add-ons, we have a couple of ways to do declarative user interfaces within the Vaadin directory as add-ons. And today we'll be focusing on the add-on that I have built called Clara.
Where did you get that name?
Well, I originally created the Eclipse project and just named it Declarative, but I thought it's kind of boring name, so then I saw the Clara in the middle of the name, so it just came Clara after a quick rename.
And she's a fine lady, I see, from the logo.
yeah, I did that logo too, so I get a bit more personality to the project. Yeah, so you can download it from directory and it's under the Apache license. And let's take a closer look what it does. So if we would have, for example, this XML element, we have this label, and the element name corresponds to the Vaadin component class names. And in this case we have a value, and the value is hello world. So this would create a new label, and the label content would be the value of hello world. And another example could be a button. And here we also have this ID defined for this button, which has a special meaning with Clara, but we'll get to that a bit later. And we have the caption set to OK. And of course, you need to compose these inside some layouts. So let's, for example, put a vertical layout inside this, so these components would be stacked vertically. So far, so good. So let's go back to this button. Here we have the button, and of course we want to do something when a user clicks the button. So as I said, we have this ID, and we can bind this declaratively defined button to the Java code by using a special UI handler annotation. And here we have this method that takes the click event, and now every time someone presses this button, this method will be called.
Do you always use UI handler annotation, or are there some different kinds of annotations?
Yeah, actually with Clara we have 3 different annotations. The UI handler is for the user interface events. In this case it's a click event, but it can be a value change event or any other event from the UI components. And then we also have a UI field annotation where you can assign some field of your Java class to a component instance, and we will see that in the live demo a bit later. And also the third annotation is a UI data source, which you can use to bind the Vaadin data sources to your components. So that case is also covered.
So UI handler is kind of the generic one.
Yeah, I guess that is the most used one because the event-based logic. So, okay, enough of the slides. Maybe I should just skip to Eclipse and start hacking around with some live coding.
All right.
Or maybe even before that, I could show what we are trying to accomplish. So here we have the basic Vaadin address book demo application. Most of you have probably seen this at some point. And on the left side, we have this table of person names. And if we click a name we get an editor on the right side. Let's change this to Teemu. And now we have edited this item. We can also remove this one, or we can filter these contacts. Let's put some search there, and we can filter the table, and we can also add new contacts here. So fairly simple. And yeah, this is the example we have also on GitHub. So I cloned the GitHub project of this one, and it uses only Java for the user interface, but now we are doing it live to change this to use Clara, and we define the user interface with XML. So as this is a Maven project, the first thing we need to do is to add Clara to this project. So let's add some dependency.
While you are adding the dependencies, I was just thinking about Maven. I'm not such a big Maven fan myself, so is there any other way to do it, or do you enforce Maven on me?
No, I will not be such a bad guy to enforce you to use Maven, but as we see now, we got the Maven dependency here, but instead you could have used Ivy, or you could just simply download the zip package from directory and copy the jar files into your project. And Clara is actually a single jar file, so it's just a matter of drag and drop into your project.
So basically normal Vaadin ways to do things.
Exactly. It doesn't differ from any other add-ons you might use.
All right.
So now that we have the Clara add-on in our project, let's create an XML file for the layout. So let's call it addressbook.xml. And let's look what we have here. Let's start on the left-hand side of the application. So clearly we have a table component here, and below the table we have a text field, and then we have this button. So let's simply add these as elements into the XML file. So let's add a table, and we can call it contacts. And then let's add a text field and call that a search. And it also had an input prompt. And it said search contacts. Like that. And then we had the button. Let's call that the add button, and it had a caption of new. So we cannot have these just laying around here without any containing layouts. So the text field and the button were next to each other. So we can wrap this into a horizontal layout like this. And the table was above of this also. Let's use a vertical layout here. Like this. But before we can see anything on the screen, we need to go to the Java code. So in the init method of this UI class, we call a method called init layout, and here we basically construct the whole application layout using Java code.
Okay, yeah, I see that you have add components and stuff there.
Yeah, exactly. So we can just remove this whole method. We are not interested in using Java to build this layout. And now we need to replace this by calling set content and clara.create. And we say we want to use the addressbook.xml file, and we bind it to this class. Now we need to restart the server, and let's take a look how how it looks. So, not too fancy yet.
By the way, I have a question about the
Sure.
how does Clara actually do it? Does it interpret or parse the XML to Java code, or how does it work under the hood?
Yeah, so when you call this Clara.create method, it basically reads the XML file and it takes a heavy use of Java reflection. So it uses reflection to instantiate your component instances, and then it calls the add component method to add these to the layout.
Mm-hmm.
There are some special cases for certain components within Vaadin, but basically it's just using reflection for everything.
Okay. And could you basically create these XML files dynamically also?
Yeah. This has some overloaded versions of this create method, which, for example, take an input stream, and you could even load it over the network if you want to be really clever, or you can just create it dynamically. So nothing prevents you from doing that.
All right.
Yeah. So let's get back to the XML layout. So in order to get a bit closer to the goal, we need to define some sizes for the components. So let's say that this table is full-sized and this horizontal layout has width of 100%. And the same width goes for the text field, and also the size full for this vertical layout we have. And one tricky thing is that we need to use the expand ratio feature of Vaadin. So let's put the expand ratio here. But why this is tricky is that this is actually a property of the layout outside. So the table itself has no expand ratio feature, but it's a property of the vertical layout. So for this case, Clara has this special XML namespace, and we need to define it here. And now Clara knows that it needs to call the expand ratio on the parent layout and give this component, this table, as a parameter. And we need this same expand ratio to the text field. And now when we save this, we can go to the browser and see how it looks. Okay, so now we clearly have the table here, but it doesn't have any data. And we have the text field here and the button. But in order to get some data, we need to go back here to the Java class. So as we see here, the table is created with Java code. Let's get rid of that and use the UI field annotation I mentioned earlier.
Oh yeah.
And let's put the ID here, so it was contacts. And let's do the same thing for the search field. Like that. And then we also create this button here, so we're not going to need that. Just remove that, but then we have compilation error. Okay, so here we have this click listener defined for this button. So we can now just pull it out here as a separate method. Let's call it, for example, add click, and add this UI handler annotation and use the add ID there. We can get rid of those lines.
That was the ID of the button in the XML, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That was defined here as ID was add. And now if we reload this, cool. Now we have all the people in the table.
It's magic.
And if I select, well, nothing happens. We haven't done the editor part yet, but let's see if the filtering works. Yeah, it works. And if we click the new button, there we have this new contact as the first one in the table.
I guess the data binding and all that was done in Java code. already?
Yeah, in this example, let's go take a look here. So we have this init contact list method, which takes care of all the data binding here. Actually, we could use the UI data source annotation, but for simplicity, I left it out from this demo. So I actually have a GitHub repository with a more complete example that uses that annotation. So
Okay.
We'll put a link to that in the YouTube video description so you can check it out.
All right.
So now if we compare this original one to what we have here, we can see that the original one has here a split panel, and then we have this form layout on the right side, and also this remove this contact button. So let's get back to Eclipse and let's go to the XML file and start by adding the horizontal layout there. I mean the horizontal split panel, like this. And now we have the first component as the left side of the horizontal split panel, and on the right side we can define the form layout. And let's call that editor. And we don't want it to be visible until the user clicks on some item of the table. So let's just say visible false. And we also had there the button, let's call that remove, and it had a caption of remove this contact, like that. And let's go back to Java code and remove also this button here. We don't need that anymore. And this form layout can now also be bound to the XML based editor form layout. And as we removed the contact button, we got some compilation errors. We don't need that one. And also here we have the same situation as with the add button. So we have the click listener defined here, so we can pull it as a separate method and call it remove, not a remote click. And UI handler for the remove. That method is no longer needed, and let's take that call away. Let's just restart the server just in case and reload. Okay, so we have this split panel here just like we wanted, and now when we select something we get the editor on the right side. Let's try if the editing works. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can remove, and we can add a new contact there. Looks like everything's working. Oh, except one small detail. If we compare this with the original one, we can clearly see that there is no margin here.
Yes, clearly.
That's an important detail. The margin is missing. So let's get back to here and just say margin equals true. And now if we reload, I was a bit too fast. Yeah. So now we have this margin here. So
okay, so
everything works.
Yeah, you can do even the final touches in the XML.
Yeah. And as you see, the workflow is pretty fast. So just make some small changes and refresh the application in your browser. Mm-hmm. At least in this simple case, it's really fast to develop.
Yeah, looks pretty convincing. Especially, I like the part if you show the XML part, how the layouts, you can see what is inside which, and it's more easier to grasp.
Yeah, you can clearly see the structure here, and also the editing is a bit easier. So if we just want to move this here and reload the application. So now we have changed the places of these two sides. So we have the table on the right side. It was again too fast. And now we get the editor on the left side.
Okay, this is the part you mentioned in the start that the designer could do easy changes.
Yeah. And we could also, for example, change this to a vertical split panel. And I guess you can, you probably can guess what happens. So then if I reload, I get a vertical version of the split panel. Yeah, so the live demo worked.
Woohoo!
Whew, that was a lot of code.
No demo
for
effects.
Such a fast demo, and yeah, but I think this demo might clarify a bit what Clara is all about. And
Well, at least you convinced me. Let's see. We have received some questions from our viewers, so let's see. Okay, first question I got from them is that Clara is an add-on. Will it be integrated in the Vaadin core framework at some point, and if yes, when?
That's a good question. Actually, I don't have an answer to that. So there has been discussions that we need a declarative UI language, but it's not in the roadmap yet, and we'll need to see how it goes.
Okay, so it's considered, but nothing is decided yet.
Yeah, that's the current status. But of course, you can download Clara from directory and
yeah, so it's usable today also.
Yeah.
How about the somebody's asking about Visual Designer. Is it gonna support the XML-based UIs?
Well, you know, today the Visual Designer tool produces Java code, but I guess at least at point, if this would be part of the core framework, it would be really important to support also the XML, and maybe we'll have to wait for that, or maybe if someone is interested in creating that kind of support themselves, it would be cool.
So it's probably gonna go hand in hand with the core framework.
Yeah, I'd say so.
All right. The next question is about add-ons. How would you use add-ons with Clara?
Well, actually using add-ons is quite simple.
Maybe you can even show in your...
Yeah, I can show it in Eclipse. So these all elements were without any namespaces defined. The Vaadin UI is the default namespace. But if you want to use some add-ons from directory or your own components, you can just create an XML namespace like my add-on, and that was like this, and you can define the package name, let's say Teemu add-on. Then you can use this namespace to use any Vaadin components here. So let's say this is my cool add-on, and it has a setter for the coolness. So let's say the coolness is max.
Of course.
So this is the way you could use any add-ons in your XML.
Looks pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it should be really simple.
Okay, more questions. How about the internationalization? How would that work with the XML UI?
Yeah, so in this example, we just put all the captions there as is.
Yeah.
Like the new button and the remove this contact. But Clara has this feature called attribute filters, which allow you to basically intercept the handling of the value. So you could define some kind of coding for your translations, and then at runtime, when the XML is read, you can make a call to your own translation service, or however you want to define this. You can just replace this coded value with the real translation at runtime. So yeah, it's possible, and in the GitHub I have some example code, so you can take a look at that.
All right. So would you say it's harder with the XML or than with Vaadin normally, or is it pretty much the same effort?
I'd say it's pretty much the same effort. It doesn't change in any dramatic way.
Yeah, you have to have your language library anyway. And
yeah. So I guess that's the most part of the internationalization. So it's just a matter of defining some coding in the XML for the translation identifiers. So.
All right. Next one that I received is about theming. Does Clara affect theming of Vaadin application? And could I declare the theming files from XML if I wanted to?
Well, the first question about the theming, it really doesn't make any difference. So as a result of parsing the XML, the final result is pretty much a normal Vaadin application. So the theming stays actually the same. Maybe one difference would be that you have maybe defined ID attributes a bit more than you might normally do in a Vaadin application. And of course, you can just use the style names, define those in your XML for the components, but the actual theme is separate, so it's done like in any other Vaadin application. So you can't put it inside the XML, at least yet. So.
Okay, all right. So it's exactly the same as business as usual.
Yeah, it's business as usual with Vaadin.
Then somebody asks about tooling. Is there tooling to help writing XML? Is there a XML schema to enable autocomplete, for example?
Well, currently there is no XML schema, but I have been thinking about as a future enhancement of building a schema generator which would scan all your components in class path, and you could have a separate XML schema for your project with all the add-on features also, though. So that would enable using autocomplete in the XML editor. So that would definitely be a nice improvement, but currently you just have to write everything by hand.
Oh, okay. So let me see if we have something else. IDE, you use Eclipse, but is there, I know that there are lots of people using different IDEs, IntelliJ and NetBeans and stuff. Does it make, is there any difference, or is it just Eclipse?
No, basically there is no difference, so you can use any XML editor, any text editor even, or any editor that supports writing XML files. So, so there is no reason that this would work only in Eclipse. So you can use any editor you are most comfortable with.
Even VI.
Yeah, VI is nice.
All right. Yeah, I think it's pretty much time to wrap up. If anyone has any more questions, please feel free to add them to Vaadin forum, and Teemu and I, we will take a look at them and answer you through forum if you didn't have a chance to ask your question yet. So thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to talk about XML UIs with you guys.
Thanks for watching.
And have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.